I was sitting in my favorite recliner, my 9mm resting in my hand, waiting quietly for the lovebirds to come downstairs from my bedroom, once they were done rolling around in my sheets. I'd moved the chair from my den and placed it right at the bottom of the staircase, tucked just out of sight from anyone coming down, at least until they hit that last step. They were so lost in each other, they didn't hear a thing. I had come back early from a business trip, hoping to surprise my wife, Lena, with tickets to Barbados. Turns out I was the one getting surprised. As soon as I stepped inside, I saw a trail of clothes, his and hers, scattered across the floor and up the stairs, like breadcrumbs of betrayal, tossed off in a hurry to get to our bedroom. I just stood there for a second, stunned, trying to wrap my head around it while I waited for them to finish. I called my law partner, he's the one in our firm who handles all the criminal stuff, and filled him in on the scene. Told him he might need to swing by the jail later and bail me out. He said he'd meet me at the station and told me not to kill anybody. I chuckled and said I'd do my best. I found the guy's pants, rifled through them, and pulled out his wallet. He had all the usual stuff, ID, credit cards, and even some pictures of his wife and kids. Then I spotted his phone, just sitting there on the coffee table like it was his second home. That told me this probably wasn't the first time. I picked it up and dialed his house. Truth is, I needed someone to talk to. Someone who might understand the kind of gut punch I was feeling. After 3 rings, a woman picked up, furious and half asleep. "Derek, where the hell are you, you sorry bastard," she shouted. "Yesterday was your daughter's 5th birthday, and you broke her heart. This is the last time, I swear, I'm filing for divorce." "I'm sorry to wake you, Mrs. Connor," I said, keeping my voice calm. I didn't realize the time. "Derek's, well, he's a little tied up at the moment, so I'll pass along your message later." She barked, "Who the hell is this and how did you get Derek's phone?" "My name's Gavin Brooks," I told her. "I came home early from a business trip and found his phone sitting on my coffee table." "Brooks," she asked. "You wouldn't happen to be Lena's husband, would you?" "She's Derek's secretary." "Guilty as charged," I said, "and it seems my soon-to-be ex-wife is playing a bit more than secretary these days." She didn't really catch that last part. She just snapped, "I don't care how busy he is, you tell him to get on the phone right now, or he better not come home at all." "Oh, Mrs. Connor, I don't think Derek will be coming to the phone anytime soon," I said flatly. "And heading home? That might be a problem too." "Why not?" she barked. "Well, right now he's upstairs with Lena, having their little encounter. And I didn't want to go up there and shoot them both, it'd ruin my bed. But I'll be honest, I'm mad enough that my aim might not be too careful." She gasped, clearly shaken. "What did you just say?" "Yeah, they're up there right now. I figured I'd let them finish before I confronted them. Lena usually likes a drink after one of her sessions, so I'll catch them when they come down for that." I paused, listening. "Hang on, I think I hear footsteps. Might be them. If I get the chance, I'll have Derek give you a call. Or at the very least, Lena can tell you which hospital the ambulance ends up taking him to." She muttered, "Don't bother. I don't ever want to see or speak to that man again. Mrs. Connor, please, for your kids' sake. Don't let them lose their father like this. You didn't do anything wrong here, and I know how hard this is. But think about them. They need him, even if he's a fool." She let out a long, tired sigh. "All right. I'll wait for your call." Then she hung up. As I sat there, the quiet wrapped around me like a cold blanket. My thoughts drifted to the life Lena and I had spent the last 7 years building. We had a nice house in the suburbs, took trips to the coast on the weekends, had what I thought was a strong marriage. I gave her everything I could, but now, my chest ached. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. Rage, pain, sadness, it all crashed over me at once. Every sweet moment we'd shared, every time she said she loved me while I was away working, now felt like poison sinking into my veins. I looked up at the wedding photo hanging on the wall. We looked happy back then, so damn happy. Was it all fake? Had she ever actually loved me? My grip tightened around the gun. The cold steel pressing into my palm reminded me of the choice I'd already made. This wasn't just about tonight. There would be fallout from this, for years. And I was going to make sure of it. Upstairs, Lena was catching her breath for the 3rd time that night. She thought she heard something from downstairs. "Derek, did you hear that?" she asked, a little out of breath. Derek, riding the wave of his own ego, hadn't heard a thing, just too busy patting himself on the back for bagging another married secretary. "Hear what?" "No, I didn't hear anything," he mumbled. Then he paused. "Wait, yeah, maybe I do hear something. Kinda faint though." It's probably just the answering machine picking up a call from Gavin, Lena said, brushing it off. Derek frowned. What the hell is Gavin doing calling at 1 in the morning? Has the guy lost his mind? Is it really that late already? Lena muttered. Gavin never calls after 10 p.m. He knows I hate being woken up in the middle of the night, so it had to be something serious for him to break that rule. Lena slipped on her robe and headed out to check the answering machine. Meanwhile, Derek, ever the narcissist, didn't even bother to grab a robe. He just strolled right behind her, completely naked, like he owned the place. If nothing else, he figured he'd help himself to a glass of my Glenlivet. He'd developed a real taste for my favorite scotch lately, right alongside his taste for my wife. Derek had this smug grin on his face as he followed Lena, completely unaware of what was waiting for him downstairs. He'd been sneaking around with Lena for months, drinking my liquor, sleeping in my bed, acting like he'd earned it. He got a kick out of taking what wasn't his, especially from someone like me. In his mind, I was just some stiff in a suit, too wrapped up in court cases to notice what was happening right under my nose. Being the VP of operations at Halcyon Dynamics had gone to his head. He thought the world owed him everything. The moment Lena came on board as his executive assistant 6 months ago, he had his eye on her. The wedding ring only made it more of a challenge. He played the long game, lingering touches, late nights at work, flirty comments that crossed all kinds of lines. Eventually, she gave in. Their first time was after hours, right there in his office. That rush of doing something forbidden, it had them hooked. From there, it turned into hotel rooms, and eventually, our own bedroom while I was away handling cases out of town. Gavin's never gonna find out, he'd tell her over and over. He's too buried in work. But as Lena reached the last step on the stairs, something made her stop dead in her tracks. She froze so suddenly that Derek bumped into her, and they nearly tumbled to the floor. He was about to snap at her for stopping when the living room light flicked on, and there I was, sitting calmly in my chair, not 5 feet away, with my 9mm in hand and aimed right at them. Lena screamed. Derek went ghost white. His eyes locked on the gun, and all that cocky confidence melted away. His heartbeat must have been pounding out of his chest, and suddenly he looked very aware of how naked and exposed he was. This wasn't how it was supposed to play out. He thought I'd be in Boston for 2 more days. Gavin, it's not, Lena started, her voice shaking, but one look at me and she knew. We were done. Don't even, I told her, my tone cool. Shut your mouth, you lying, cheating woman. She crumpled to the floor, sobbing, and I turned my attention to Derek. Well, one thing's for sure, I said. Guess I won't be needing a new robe. So, thanks for saving me the trouble, Jeffy boy. Of course, I will have to buy a new bed, new sheets, and a new wife. Can't win 'em all, huh? Derek started backing away slowly, clearly thinking of making a run for it. I fired a round into the wooden banister behind him, shattering it into splinters. The sound cracked through the house like thunder. Lena screamed again, clamping her hands over her ears. Derek froze, wide-eyed with terror. A dark stain spread down his leg. He'd pissed himself. Great, I said flatly. Now I've got to replace the damn banister too. You're getting real expensive, Jeffy boy. But don't leave just yet, we've got things to discuss. A whole list of things to settle, and not a lot of time. I turned to Lena, who was still shaking on the floor. How long, Lena? How many times? I know tonight alone it's been at least 3 rounds. But I've got no clue when this all started. So how long have you been screwing this guy? She looked up at me, face streaked with tears, and she could tell, this wasn't an act. I wasn't bluffing. I was calm, which made it all the more dangerous. When I get wronged, I don't yell, I get deliberate. 6 months, Gavin, she finally admitted. Every time you were out of town. I don't know how many times. And no, we didn't use protection. I laughed, short and bitter. 6 months. Damn. And no protection. What were you doing, trying to get pregnant? She shook her head desperately, but I wasn't done. I looked over at Derek. So, Jeffy boy. No protection, huh? Should I be calling my doctor first thing in the morning? You think I'm just gonna take your word on this? You're not just fooling around with Lena, are you? Got any other secretaries on rotation? He stayed quiet. Silent and naked at the bottom of the stairs, staring down the barrel of a gun. He had nothing left to say. Lena blinked, horrified. She hadn't even considered that she might have passed something from Derek to me. Her eyes filled with new guilt. Oh God, Gavin, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I didn't think about STDs. But I've been on birth control pills the whole time. Wow, I said, shaking my head. So thoughtful of you. My sweet little cheating wife, though I guess I can't really call you that anymore. You haven't been mine for at least 6 months. I narrowed my eyes at her. Is Derek the first? Or have there been others before him? She swallowed hard. He's the only one. I swear. I've never been with anyone else behind your back. I know I screwed up, but I love you, Gavin. I always have. This was just physical, she whispered, like that made it better. No, Lena, I shot back, my voice sharp. I don't have to believe a single word coming out of your mouth. And it wasn't just physical, it was everything. You blew up our marriage, shattered my trust, wrecked any self-respect I had left. You broke your vows. You threw away any chance we had of building a family. Hell, for all I know, you've put both our health at risk because of your reckless, unprotected fling with this sack of garbage. I felt the words tear out of me, raw and loud, cutting through the air like a blade. The pain behind them wasn't hidden, it filled the room, heavy and impossible to ignore. 7 years. 7 damn years. And now it all led to this pathetic scene, standing here with a gun in hand, watching everything I'd built go up in flames. I reached into my pocket and felt the crumpled envelope with the tickets to Barbados, our anniversary gift. I was going to surprise her. Now the whole thing felt like some kind of cruel cosmic joke. I turned to Derek. So, what do I do with you, Jeffy boy? I let the question hang for a moment. Well, first off, I'll be suing you. Alienation of affection. Thanks to you, I'm divorcing the woman I once called my wife. But I'm not stopping there. I'm coming after your company, your board, and their board too, everyone up that corporate food chain who turned a blind eye to their little morality clause. Then I gave a grim smile. But that's not even the good part. I tossed his phone back to him. I had a lovely chat with your wife while I was waiting for you two lovebirds to finish defiling my bed. His eyes flicked to the phone, confusion and dread mixing on his face. Oh, and just so you know, you might want to treat your kid a little better. It was her 5th birthday yesterday, and you skipped it to come screw my wife. Call your soon-to-be ex-pal. No. Gavin, tell me you didn't, Lena gasped, clutching her robe. Oh, but I did, I said, almost cheerfully. And by the way, did you ever mention to Jeffy boy here what I do for a living? She shook her head, silent. Well then, I continued, turning back to the naked coward in front of me, I'm one of the top divorce attorneys in this state. The other 2 guys people call. They work for me. And your wife? She'll have a dream team representing her, and we're doing it pro bono. Derek's face fell even further, if that was possible. He turned away, clutching his phone like it might somehow shield him from the storm. Oh, and Jeffy, I added, you'll be paying through the rear for this. I raised the pistol and put a bullet right into his right butt cheek. He hit the floor hard, howling like a wounded animal. You shot me. You shot me, he kept repeating, curled up and crying like a toddler who'd lost his blankie. You're damn lucky I didn't put one between your eyes, you smug bastard. I shouted, my blood boiling. I glanced at Lena, who stood frozen in horror. I calmly pulled out my phone and dialed 911 for the cops and an ambulance. I'd already called my firm earlier, my defense lawyer was en route before I ever pulled the trigger. As I ended the call, I looked Lena dead in the eyes. When the medics get here, find out which hospital they're taking your lover to, I told her. Then, be a decent human, call his wife. Let her know, so she can bring his kids to see their sorry excuse for a father. It's the very least you can do after tearing apart their lives. She just dropped her gaze and said nothing. Nothing at all. The holding cell reeked of old sweat, bleach, and broken spirits. I sat on a cold metal bench, my back resting against a concrete wall, just waiting for Eli Mercer to show up. We'd been partners for 20 years, he was a good man, a better lawyer, and about as loyal as they come. My right hand still felt the weight of the gun, even though I'd handed it over the moment the cops showed up. They were surprisingly professional, almost understanding. Once they got the full story, Brooks, a guard called out, swinging open the door. Your lawyer's here. Bail's cleared. Eli was waiting for me in the processing area, looking as polished as ever in his flawless suit, like it wasn't 4 a.m. Let's get you home, he said, putting a steady hand on my shoulder. Is there anything left of it? I asked quietly. The house is still there, he said. Lena's gone. I sent Tyler and a couple of paralegals over to supervise. She only took what was hers. The prenup's solid. You wrote it yourself, remember? In the car, Eli brought me up to speed. Turns out Derek had been patched up and discharged from St. Vincent Medical Center. It was a clean shot, nothing life-threatening. His wife, Sarah, showed up at the hospital with divorce papers already signed and ready to go, and Lena. I asked, staying with her sister. Her attorney called yours this morning. She's not challenging the prenup. Smart move, I muttered, staring out the window as the streetlights blurred past. She'd lose. She knows it. I nodded slowly. The road ahead would be messy, but it was familiar territory for me. In court, I could take back a little control, piece by piece. Take me home, Eli, I said. I need a shower and about 12 hours of sleep before we start dismantling Derek Wallace's life. 3 days later, Eli showed up at my place with coffee, breakfast, and a leather portfolio packed with documents. He'd been busy. Derek Wallace, he said, laying out the paperwork across my kitchen table, has quite the file. 3 harassment complaints in the last 5 years, all settled quietly. Meridian's been covering his tracks. Because he brings in the big fish, I said, sipping my coffee. My brain was already shifting into gear, assembling legal angles and attack strategies. Exactly, Eli replied. And it gets even better. Sarah Wallace came by the office this morning. She's done playing nice. She's got names, messages, dates. She's ready to take the whole thing down in flames. She's willing to testify. Not just willing. She's fired up. Already filed for full custody, citing moral unfitness. Missing his kid's birthday was the last straw. I gave a slow nod. I understood her anger more than I wanted to admit. We'd both been betrayed by the people we trusted most, and Lena. I asked, her name like ash in my mouth. Rachel Benton. I raised an eyebrow. Now that was a smart move. Rachel was sharp, one of the few divorce attorneys in the state I genuinely respected. Eli nodded. Yeah. She reached out this morning. Lena's not contesting a thing. She's waiving her claim to the house, the investments, everything that's not specifically hers in the prenup. She just wants her personal stuff and to be done with it. I gave a quiet nod and shifted my attention to the files spread across the table. Now, let's talk about Wallace. And Halcyon Dynamics Oration. I want them both to bleed. Eli smiled. Figured you might say that. Meridian's headquarters took up the top 10 floors of a high-rise downtown, glass, steel, and way too much self-importance. 5 minutes after walking in unannounced, with a process server and a court reporter flanking us, we were escorted to the executive suite. Clayton Reeves, the CEO, stood as we entered, his handshake ready, face locked in that polished corporate smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Brooks, Mr. Mercer. What a surprise. What brings you here? I didn't take his hand. You know exactly why we're here, Mr. Reeves. Your VP of Operations, Derek Wallace, has been having an affair with my wife, his secretary. Most of it happened on company time. In your offices. Reeves's grin disappeared. I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Brooks. But that sounds like a personal issue between you, your wife, and Mr. Wallace. I gave a slight nod, and the process server stepped forward, handing over a thick envelope. Not anymore. You're being sued for creating a hostile work environment, ignoring your own morality clauses, and letting a predator operate under your roof. Reeves's face darkened as he flipped through the paperwork. These are serious claims. With serious evidence, Eli added. We've got multiple women lined up, ready to testify about being harassed or pressured by Wallace over the years. Your company knew. And you protected him. Reeves clenched his jaw. So what is it you're really after here, Mr. Brooks? Justice, I said. And accountability. Your company's been cleaning up Wallace's messes for years while he wrecked people's lives. That ends now. Eli leaned in. Your legal team will probably advise you to settle fast and quiet. But we're not interested in quiet. Every deposition, every motion, every filing, it'll all be public record. The press is going to have a field day. Reeves sank into his chair like the weight of the lawsuit had already hit him. What would it take to settle this, amicably? I leaned forward and laid out my terms. When I got to the 7-figure payout, Reeves's face turned the color of printer paper. 2 days later, he called me himself. They accepted. 3 years passed. The Hawaiian sky was on fire with sunset, gold, orange, a hint of purple streaking across the horizon as I stood out on the lanai of a beachfront condo. I'd almost surprised Lena with all those years ago. I'd kept the reservation. Just pushed it back. And now, finally, I'd taken the trip alone. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Wallace. No, Sarah Torres now. She'd gone back to her maiden name, past the bar. Celebrating with the kids tonight. Thank you for everything, Gavin. I smiled and sent back a congratulations. She'd worked her tail off, clerked for us during law school, then joined the family law division at the firm. Her own story gave her a kind of fire that clients trusted. She was damn good at what she did. Derek Wallace, meanwhile, wasn't faring so well. Fired from Meridian, blacklisted from corporate circles, and toxic to just about anyone with a reputation to protect. Last I heard, he was pushing used cars in another state, living in a cheap apartment, scraping by on what was left after alimony and child support, and Lena, I didn't think about her much anymore. She'd moved to the East Coast not long after the divorce. I'd heard she'd found steady work, made some new friends. She never remarried. Neither did I. My phone rang. It was Eli. Gavin, he said, sorry to interrupt the piece, but I thought you should know, there's news. What kind? Lena called the office today. She's back in town. Staying with her sister again. She asked if you'd meet with her. I felt a flicker in my chest, something between tension and curiosity. But it passed. What did you tell her? I said you were out of the country and couldn't be reached. Figured you didn't need the hassle. You figured right. Eli hesitated. There's more. She's sick, Gavin. Cancer. Advanced. That landed harder than I expected. For all the betrayal, all the wreckage. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just a kind of quiet heaviness. How bad? I asked. Her sister says it's terminal. Months, not years. I closed my eyes. Let it sink in. When I opened them, the sky was darker now, stars just starting to show through the deepening blue. I'll call her when I'm back, I said softly. No promises beyond that. We hung up. I stood there a while longer, staring out at the endless ocean. I thought I'd feel something like triumph. Some twisted sense of justice. But all I felt was peace. Not closure, exactly. Just a quiet kind of understanding. Some endings are painful. But sometimes they clear the way for the kind of beginning you never knew you needed. I hadn't wanted this journey. I hadn't asked for it. But somehow, standing there under that Hawaiian sky, I realized I'd made it out the other side a stronger, wiser man, maybe even a whole one. This wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a good life, all the same, because revenge isn't always about destroying the person who hurt you. Sometimes, it's about rebuilding yourself into someone who no longer needs them. And that's the end of today's story. If it hit you in the gut, or even made you think, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Your support helps me keep sharing more stories like this one. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It really makes a difference. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.